So, the theme today is no assumptions. But, you heard Marcus say at the end, no risk, no reward. So finding that balancing point between risk, assumption, and completing your mission. So I'll tell you guys an interesting story. At the very beginning of making this show, nobody had ever made a show like this before anywhere in the world. Any idea on why nobody had ever tried to make a show like this?
Trying to deal with air show before, so they're trying to hurt cats.
Yeah, well, that's a challenge, but that wasn't the most dangerous part. Think about, we had to put cameras in airplanes. We didn't want to be responsible as a TV crew for killing somebody, so we got cameras everywhere. You guys have all heard the stories about a tool jamming a flight control in an airplane. We're in these airplanes crawling around with our tools, putting cameras in. That was one of our big fears. Plus, you couldn't put cameras in the old days on a wing because the camera was that big. Now we had GoPros, right? So anyway, bottom line is technology allowed us to do that. We had done a bunch of TV shows in aviation before, so we sort of felt we had a pretty good understanding. But I went to Rob, who I'd worked with on a Snowbirds documentary previously, and I said, hey, Scratch, this whole thing seems super dangerous. Can we make it safe? Can I guarantee everybody's going to come back home? And what did you say to me?
No, I decided we cannot eliminate all risk. It's impossible. We're going to have to manage the risk, and I can promise you we'll manage the risk, and we'll have layers of mitigation for that. But we're going into this accepting there is a risk.
Did you guys ever see another TV show on Discovery Channel called Dangerous Flights? So there's a TV show about delivering airplanes, and I did the pilot for that show. So the pilot means I went out, I did the first episode, shot it, and then they put it together. And at the end of that episode, we flew an airplane from Tracy, California, very close to Byron, to Australia. Twin engine Merlin, Garrett dashed hands on it, and we flew that out across the Pacific. We actually set 2 world records, distance speed records for that airplane of that class. And we had fuel in bladders and stuff inside the plane. We had to really manage the fuel well. Anyway, at the end of it, we landed and everything was great. And the producers in Montreal, the company, said, well, how was that? I said, well, it was good. I said, but I'm going to make a suggestion to you guys. If you guys are going to make this show, you need to hire a consultant. Somebody who is independent from the production that could look at each one of the flights that we were going to go on and assess it for risk. And I said, if you don't do that, you're going to kill somebody. Anyway, the company fired me. They went and made the TV show, and 8 episodes later, they killed a guy in Africa. Cameraman went up, hired a local pilot in an ultralight to go fly around Mount Kenya. And they got into some bad winds, killed himself, killed the pilot. Because he just didn't know what they didn't know. So that young cameraman made an assumption that that pilot that he hired knew what he was doing. And unfortunately, the pilot was a local doctor, just loved to fly. For some reason, when you put a camera in an airplane, everybody thinks they're invincible. I don't know why, it just happens. Especially with helicopter pilots. I don't know, it's really weird. So anyway, let's get into the show. Let's talk about the first assumption that was made in this episode that you saw, and then let's work through the assumptions. So what was the first assumption anybody picked up that was a potential problem for someone?
No gas to make it back.
There was one more before that one.
You assume the weather would just be
Got it. Right. So he left from where, Edmonton?
Oh, Fort St. John. Oh no, so he left from Edmonton, yeah.
Yeah, left from Edmonton. So Edmonton to Fort Mac is what, about 400?
Fort St. John.
I'll just mute cameras. The background.
About 450K? 450 miles. So he's in an airplane. Anybody know anything about a pit special?
Yeah, I got to fly one.
You have to fly
I
one.
fly in one.
Yeah. So what did you notice about that airplane?
It's very small.
Yeah, and what else did you know? How was it instrumented?
Instruments are fairly limited. At least I didn't get a big look at the rear, but I was in the front. But yeah, instrument wise, yeah, you don't have a lot of stuff that you need.
So he doesn't have weather radar. Does he have an autopilot?
No, the one that I got to go in,
No.
it's
There's no-
bare minimum.
So in a pit special, we want that airplane to be as light as possible, right? 340 horsepower. It's all about power to weight. That airplane probably weighs 1,000 pounds. It's because he wants to be able to do those big, huge vertical climbs, right? So he's got nothing in that airplane. He's got, I don't even know if he has a 6-pack in there, but he has airspeed. He's probably got a horizon. He may not even have an artificial horizon. Would he have an artificial horizon in that, do you think?
Probably so.
In that airplane?
In
his pits?
I'm not sure.
You'd have a basic black ball.
You probably have something. Bottom line is not a lot. So now he's in weather. Do you think he went IMC there, you guys? At any point?
Quite a couple times.
Yeah. How fast do you think it would take for somebody in a pit special? By the way, it's first season flying that airplane. So he's probably got 30 hours on it. How long would it take for a guy in a pit special flying IMC with 500 hours to get himself turned upside down?
7 seconds.
Probably less than 30, right?
500 hours total flight time,
Yeah.
not 500 hours IMC.
Yeah, 500 hours total flight time.
I've never flown a pits, but I understand that they're not, I mean, they may not be divergent stability-wise, but they have no real natural tendency to stay stable. Like if you stop paying attention, they're immediately going to start.
Yeah, it's
Somewhere
a
or
tippy
other.
canoe. It's like
Yeah.
a lot of them, you put it level and it could go right. You put it level, it could go left. So yeah, you're constantly, you have about a second.
Okay,
You have
this-
to cross-check.
Second thing is, what was he doing? How was he navigating?
Try to unfold that map.
Well, but what did he have going before that?
Yeah, GPS. GPS failed.
GPS. What happened to his GPS?
Started to fail.
What happens to GPSs in the north? They stop working. Satellites are crap up there. I've had it happen to me. I'm sure you had it in the jet a few times, right? With your GPS. So he made an assumption. I'm going up north. I got my GPS. This is awesome. But he's made an assumption. Weather, GPS. So there's two. Okay, what's the next assumption he made? This is the big one, right?
Enough gas to make it.
Okay.
Or that is auxiliary tank would work.
So he made an assumption. So what was his mistake? I'm not going to ask you. You know. Everybody thinks the captain should stay quiet. Hands up. Yeah. Good. Thank you.
Is that just for now?
Okay. Come on, guys. How should he have managed his fuel?
Should have landed to the airport without this.
That's after he's got problems. How could he avoided getting to that point?
I'm thinking if he maybe could have leaned the mixture a little bit. Is that just maybe prolong it, the actual fuel
This-
longer?
This is a really good example of what you don't know what you don't know. He didn't know this. I didn't know this till I had to go to Australia. I fly 414 now, and I actually have the same problem as he does. So let's see if we can lead you guys to this, okay?
Transfer the gas before he's out of gas.
What's that?
Transfer gas before he runs out.
Yes, exactly. So he takes off from takes off from Fort Mac. How long should he stay on his mains?
Depends on how much gas is in a main, but I would say hypothetically, depending on weight and balance, he should get it out of the auxiliary tank as soon as he has enough space in the main tanks, right?
So somebody else, how would you do that? So you would take off. So you take off on what? Take off on your mains, right? Exactly. Burn, what, 10, 15 minutes maybe? And then what? Switch to the aux. And then he finds out the aux isn't working. What could he do then?
Gas.
What's that?
Land someone with gas on
He
the
could
way.
have turned around and gone back, right? To Fort Mac. And then Fixed it. You know what it was? You know what the problem was? I think it was a battery, right?
Yeah, it was, I think, just a little transfer
Was it-
solenoid or battery.
Yeah, there was a battery that ran something that was shorting out. It kept tripping the breaker. It was a 9-volt battery. I had to replace it. That was it. That was the problem. 9-volt battery almost killed him. Okay, there was another assumption he made. So now you guys know. How does this apply to flying out 172?
Making sure you have enough fuel for your.
And make sure you got more than enough fuel.
Yeah.
Second thing is, don't fly and burn the left tank out completely, right? And have all this gas in your right tank. You got all the gas in the world, but there's a blockage in the right tank, plus you're all out of balance. So keep going back and forth. Do that, do that, do that. That'll save you.
When we do air-to-air refueling, it's exactly what we do. When we go over to Europe, we tank multiple times. We probably could get away with tanking only once, maybe twice, but we're always tanking to keep topping up so that we could divert anywhere. So in this case, at very least, you want to be able to verify that auxiliary tank's working before you get to your turn back point, right? And that was his big mistake in this case, but it's exactly what we did in F-18s. We would constantly top them up because you never know if your air refueling system fails or you have a bad connection. And we can talk about my call sign at the end if you want to know a story, because it's also a very good story about assumptions. But we'll save that at the end if there's time.
Okay, what's the next assumption that he made?
Oh yeah, that he would be okay to get to Yellowknife. He was looking at the fuel quantities. He was lucky he cleared the lake. But yeah, he was thinking he'd be fine instead of taking the precautionary landing at that field that was a lot closer.
Okay. Okay, so there's Fort Res, right? So he was probably somewhere right about here when they said, okay, Fort Res is whatever. Was it 9 o'clock?
Yeah.
Okay, so he was here then, right? And he's going here. So what else do you guys see on that map? Okay, what else do you see? I want you guys to put yourselves right here. You're running out of gas. You guys got your 4 flights? You got your phones? Tell me what that is.
Hay River.
Hay River. Okay, what's available at Hay River? First off, how long is the runway? What's it made out of? And what's available?
Oh, jet and avgas. Oh, fuel.
What's available there?
Jet and avgas.
Avgas. Interesting. How long is the runway at Hay River?
6,000 feet.
Yeah, oh, 6,000.
And how many runways do they have?
2.
They have a crosswind and a 6,000-foot, 100-foot wide concrete runway. Why would he not have gone there?
He was advised of it, and maybe didn't know the area.
Okay, so he's made an assumption. What's the assumption he made?
We assume the controller was giving him the best option.
Assume the controller doesn't know. You can reject an instruction if you're not comfortable with it, right? You guys know that? If you don't like it, if they say fly heading 030, and there's a big towering queue in front of you, and they say fly heading 030 for traffic, what do? Do you fly into the cloud? No fucking way. So he could have asked, and I don't know what he was doing up there and not knowing the local whatever. But if you're flying somewhere and you've just flown into IMC like an hour earlier, wouldn't you be thinking about your alternates? Where are the other places I can go if it's crap here? The other thing that was happening at this time, there were huge forest fires up there. And I remember I flew my Mooney up there for this show, and I had to descend down through 6,000 feet of cloud in IMC. It wasn't cloud, sorry, smoke. I was over the top, it was great, my day was awesome. It showed clear over Fort Mac. But when they were giving me the ceilings, they gave me the ceilings, unlimited, but they didn't tell me there was smoke. It was like unlimited ceilings, 30 miles visibility, but nobody told me anything about the smoke. So there I was in the smoke, IMC, trying to descend down. So We had smoke, we had weather, he was flying just about IMC. What if he couldn't have got into here? What if he got there and, you know, he couldn't land? Somebody crashed on the runway, the airport's closed. Where's he gonna go? He should have known about that option. So even though you guys are flying VFR, and I don't know if this is how you guys instruct them or not, but are you guys thinking about your alternates? Okay, that's awesome. That's gonna help keep you guys safe.
Can I interject here? There's actually a larger issue here. Has anyone picked up, what's his mental state as he goes into this whole situation?
Well, yeah, he's like asphyxiated on that air, so he wants to
Yeah. That's so important, right? As you start your aviation careers, you're going to have missions that you give yourself or you're given that become really important in your mind. Whether it's you're flying home to show your parents the first time you've flown an airplane in, or your first air show, incredible amount of pressure he put on himself to make that happen. We call it press-on-itis. We've heard these terms as well. It's a human factors, and it affects your decision making. So when you apply an undue pressure like that, you actually seek to validate your assumptions. So you talk yourself into these things. So he's trying to create the conditions that validate what he wants to happen rather than what is really happening. And it's a really dangerous mental position to get into. So you're absolutely right in these perceptions of this. That is, you know, we go back to first principles on things. Even before all these assumptions began, he actually set himself up for a mental picture where he was going to allow the assumptions to fill in the blanks for him, because that's the picture he wants to see, rather than a picture that is unfolding in front of him. Really good question.
Get to the actual I just want to get
Yeah,
there.
that's exactly it. You know, I felt it. You felt it. Absolutely, it is. And here at 0 knots, so easy to say, how did you do that? And we have to be careful. We're not trying to beat him up here, right? Because I've been there. I've been there in $30-some million F-18s. And if we have time, I'll tell you a story that just this year I allowed myself to get talked into something. And like, how did I get myself into this picture after 30 years of flying jets? How does it happen? It happens. And the more junior you are, just the easier it is to happen.
It's a case of you just don't know what you don't know yet. And that's why we're here today. We wanted to just get you guys there thinking about things. And there's a couple of rules I've learned along the way, flying with some amazing people, Scratch and other people. And there's two sort of things in my mind that I always check. And if I hear these things, I immediately turn around, land, whatever. So one of the things was said in the show, Stefan said it. What was the line that he said that would make you go, I'm probably over the line here? Anybody hear it?
Would it be when he decided to go over the lake?
What did he say? What were the words that he said?
He was counting out the gallons he had left.
Yeah, and after that he said something. I want you guys to write this down. Okay, you got it.
I think I can make it.
I should make it. I think I can make it. I should write this down, guys. And I want you to put this as your screensaver. Do something with it so you never, ever, ever forget this. I should make it is not good enough. Okay? I should make it is your cue to stop, to turn around, to go seek safety. Does everybody get that? Does everybody agree with me on that? Captain, do you agree with me on that?
Absolutely, sir, 100%.
I should make it. And the second thing I've learned is never fly angry, never fly distracted. A good friend of mine told me that, and he actually unfortunately killed himself. He hit a power line. He broke his own rule. He was distracted, he was a little bit angry about something that had happened to him, and he went flying, Figured that would make him feel better. And he had a power line. So if you broke up with your girlfriend, if you had a fight with your mom, if you got in a rear end collision on the way to the airport, don't go flying. Your head's not in it. Because your head has to be in it to hear yourself say, what is it that you wrote down?
I should make it.
If you can't hear yourself say, I should make it, then you can't turn around. You got anything to say to that there, Rob?
No, it builds on, we say that mental state, and I know you do a lot of human factors training. That's something that's improved over the years, but it almost sounds like motherhood kind of stuff, but it's amazing how much of a difference mental state makes in this business.
And Carol had an assumption moment, right? She goes like this. What was her assumption?
That he was asking if she was okay.
Yeah. She assumed he understood what this meant. Right? Remember in the plane we go, I have control, you have control. Why do we say that?
Sure, he was flying.
Yeah. So if nobody's flying the airplane, we got a big problem, don't we?
You heard them do that.
Didn't that happen?
Yeah.
They did it during that
Yeah,
show
it wasn't
once.
my jet.
And I thought you were on the controls. No, I wasn't touching the controls.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
in a jet pointing downhill. That's not fabulous.
It's it.
Yeah, and look, like, I've been trained in this kind of harsh environment, military environment, and still we had that confusion, that not that positive transfer control.
And it does happen all the time. You know, you have this professional respect for this person flying next to you. In that case, it was Randy in the back seat of the plane. He owns the fleet. So the guy in the front seat knows that Randy's a very good airship pilot. Well, I thought you had control. No. You can see it can happen. So don't let that happen. Don't assume that the guy flying next to you has done something, put the gear down or whatever, check, make sure it's down. So let's give you an update on where everybody is, who you saw in that show. The great news is, Stefan is still alive, doing very well. He was flying air ambulances for a while. Did a great job doing that. He now flies for
WestJet, he's
Yeah.
WestJet.
the WestJet guy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, pretty cool, right? Super nice guy. I mean, he's really one of my favorite pilots around. Modest, kind. He took his lumps for that, and he didn't quit. By the way, he kept working and working and working and working. He just got better and better. He ended up going out and buying a triplane and did an air show routine based on.
Richtofen.
Red Bear.
Red Baron. And so what's he doing now in terms of air shows? Anybody know? He's Carol's pilot.
Oh.
Isn't that interesting how that all came together?
You know, one of the things I think it's also important, what's the good news out of what you saw in this episode? What's the silver lining in all this?
They all learned their lesson.
Yeah, and what was the attitude that allowed them to learn that lesson?
I guess just that they knew that they made a mistake and that they were like, okay, I need to.
Yeah, they didn't, there wasn't one person in there that said, no, what are you doing? It's my fault, or it's your fault. Everyone accepted responsibility. And that's, a lot of people ask, and it's, if we have questions later, you can ask some stuff about snowbirds and whatnot, but that is one of the ways we select people. Sometimes it's not the best hands and feet pilot that makes the team. It's the people that come in, they don't try to win the debrief. They don't try to cover up their mistakes. It's that they're very forthright in their mistakes, and we're looking for a learning curve. But more importantly, we're looking for the way they learn and their self-reflection that make the snowbirds. You have to have that complete humility to say, my bad, I did this. And you have to have that ability to do it when you're by yourself in an airplane and you walk back in this room and say, hey everybody, here's what I did today, I hope we can learn from this. Because it's easier to say that here at 0 knots, and when you go do something dumb and you think you're going stupid in front of your peers, but you don't make the snowbirds unless you have that skill set.
And the cool thing about aviation is the whole system is almost built around mistakes and helping you guys learn from your mistakes. You're up there flying around and, you know, I don't know, you do something, you're doing steep turns and, you know, you're getting 300 feet, losing 400 feet, and you're going to 50 degrees and 20 degree, and it's just like a bag of hammers up there. But you don't come back to the ground and your instructor says, man, you are an idiot. Like, what do you got, like fish for hands? No, your instructor sits and goes, okay, how can we work on that? And we are always building and building. You know, when I did my flight tests, my multi or my IFR, I made a couple of mistakes. Came back down, they said, okay, this is what you did, here's how you can learn from it. And as long as you accept those mistakes and understand it, everybody in this community is there to help you build on it. So don't chew your buddies out for making mistakes. Be constructive and be willing to accept constructive criticism. Certainly the snowbirds and the military, that's the whole thing. It's built around that. Because everybody makes mistakes. None of us are perfect.
Sometimes you get call signs for them.
Yeah.
Scratch, if you could maybe expand on your time with the snowbirds. In my opinion, those are the most amazing pilots. I'm Canadian, I'm very partial. But I had also the privilege of being in the debrief and going minute by minute through the video recording, and I have never seen a more self-critical group of pilots picking on every detail and taking responsibility and improving. And my opinion, but I would like to have your take on that, I think that's what makes the snowbirds as perfect as it can possibly be.
Yeah, well,
that improvement with each flight.
it is, and that's the thing. We accept we're never going to have a perfect show. We're never going to have a perfect flight. And so with that assumption, we know that there's always something to improve. And then the construct of the team, we sit down, the 9 of us, and we basically, before the tape even runs, because all the evidence is on
Hang on,
tape.
so for a second. What would happen if you didn't have this process? What would happen to the team if you guys were just a bunch of like big puffed up, you know, red suit wearing egos?
Well, yeah.
What would happen to the team and what would happen to those debriefs?
Well, I think it goes back to my point about how we select people on the team, because I think the alternative is you create a group of individuals.
But what happens if you didn't do that? What happens if you just took like hair and teeth and, you know, the guys that look great in the Instagram posters, like, hey, right?
Well, you try to get both. But
But talk about trust and what would happen to the team.
Well, it would completely erode, and in this kind of flying, you've probably seen it, we'll have done 4 feet of wing overlap. Incredible, our wings are this close together, and you need that incredible trust. And so the ultimate, I don't know what you're fishing for here, but at the end of the day, if you don't have that implicit trust on the ground, you're not going to have it in the air. And if you even have that little bit of doubt in the sky when we're flying that close, and you have that apprehension, that's when accidents happen. You have to have a full commit when we're flying in those shows. You have to have, I know that when I was lead solo for the Patriots, that banker was going to miss me because I was setting the line and he did the miss. And it was like, ready, hit! And if he didn't do that, our wings are going to get real close. I had never a doubt. And so the reason that I had never a doubt is in every debrief, he was like, yeah, I was a little slow on my timing here as we were working up and getting closer and closer together. I knew he was completely self-aware, and so that gave us the trust that I wasn't like pulling away or you get into these chicken games, right? So that's at the ultimate reality of this. You don't have that level of implicit trust. You don't have that ultimate level of
And when you guys are going flying with people, so I've probably had more hours in a snowbird jet than I think there's maybe one other civilian that's got me beat. Bob Brandon, I think, has me beat. But for a long time, I was like the only cameraman other than Bob that didn't get sick in the plane. So I got to shoot all this video for a while. And I flew the sign-off show with him in Moose Jaw. I was in his plane, right? So they're still fairly new team, right? They haven't actually flown a show yet. They've flown Comox. They go for their sign-off show in Moose Jaw. It's really windy. And I did not want to be there, because I didn't trust these guys yet. I hadn't spent all that time. If I would have been a pilot, I'd have been out of there. And I never flew once with the Patriots in the L-39. Even though they said, "Oh, take Mark, go in the back seat, you go have a flight." Never once, because they didn't know those guys. So if you don't know somebody, and they give you a ride in the back seat of their plane, you know, don't go crazy out there because you still don't quite know them yet. You've got to also be able to trust them as well. That's at least my advice.
Yeah, no, I think it is. And on the snowbirds, we were offered a lot of, hey, just jump in, you want to go fly this airplane, do this or that. Not only do we get excessive professional courtesy where people think you're a snowbird pilot, you can fly anything, which is not true, right? You know, I'm not a tailwheel guy. I wouldn't jump in your tailwheel airplane and go fly it with confidence. But I think so too, is until you know the airplane and the person, be cautious about it. And I think that's a good point, because when you're eager and young as a pilot, you just want to bank experience. But just ask those questions, I guess. What else were you going at in terms of the snowbirds then?
Your experience with the snowbird, anything you would like to share with
Tell-
us? I just love the team.
Tell us how this is a good assumption story. Actually, this is probably one of the best assumption stories ever. I just don't have video of it, but tell the story of how you got your name and what was the assumption error you made.
Well, that's preceding snowbirds. So I was a brand new baby fighter pilot, and I was, how old are you guys? 18, 19? So I wasn't much older than you when I started. I dropped my first bomb at 22 years old. I just went right through the pipeline, and it was, you know, I was flying at 150 feet, doing 540 knots in an F5 at 22. It was awesome, right? And so we go through the training mill, and you get silly nicknames in the training process, but until you really get to your squadron, that's when you get your real call sign. So I was 24, showing up on the fighter squadron, and I was one of the test Anglophones sent to Bagotville to the French squadron, 433, the Porky Pig squadron.
So basically, he's one of the first English-speaking pilots. He goes through French-speaking school.
Isn't that what I just said?
Yeah, but you said it in some weird code that they didn't understand. So he goes to Bagotville, and he's like this
Let me tell the story.
English guy.
He's a journalist. They always try to...
I try to simplify it.
Yeah. So anyway, so this test Anglophone on this Francophone squadron, we had a French exchange officer from the French Air Force that was on squadron, and everything was in French. Weather briefings, your morning brief, even the way we brief some of the missions. Any Francophones here or French speaking? A little bit. So you know, I've become bilingual, but I still sound like an Anglophone, of course. And we did what was called combat ready training. So for the first month, you did all these missions just to get you ready. And I was doing two-ship with the French exchange pilot, and he was briefing me in French. And he asked me, "Avez-vous déjà fait de ravitaillement aérien? Have you ever done air-to-air refueling?" I'm like, oui. Once on a Hercules at 410 Squadron, the F-18 training unit. And so naturally, I made the assumption we would go and tank off a Hercules. Well, light the afterburners, 32,000 horsepower, down the runway we go. I go up and I see this airplane in the sky with giant wingspan. I'm like, low wing. I'm like, that's not a Hercules. And I said to myself in my head, what are the chances that tanking on a 707 was different than a Hercules? As it turns out, the chances are fairly high it's different. So in the Hercules, they have a really long hose, and it's a soft basket. It's like a badminton shuttle. And you fly the basket because there's an amplitude to it because it has a large hose. And you time it, and it's soft, and if you get it slightly askew, you just push it and it'll center and go in. That's the way we learned. On the 707, it was a tiny little hose and very rigid with a metal basket. And you dare not look at the basket because there was this phenomenon, because the dihedral of the 707 creates in your mind a horizon. You start flying all cross-controlled, and it throws it off. So you have to fly all these references and use your focused peripheral vision to fly the basket, this hard metal basket. And you have to be dead center. So what I do, I'm like, I get it right there. Looking at it, I'm like, hey, nicely done, first shot. And I start pushing, thinking it was like the Hercules that would just center. I push, until the hose came up, went over top the canopy, around the head, around here, up and down and everything. And I came back, I connected again, I got it. Going to do the mission, I see there's a bunch of rubs on the canopy. And I land, and in my broken French to the ground crew, I said, I think you should be able to buff it out. And
There's a little scratch. I think you should be able to buff it out.
And so they come in with eyes this big. I peeled like a centimeter up and down and all over. And I was that close to the whole canopy coming apart, probably taking my head off. So that Friday at the call sign review board, I was forever known as the scratch man.
How much was it to repair that?
$250,000 for a new F-18 canopy. Yeah, so the Queen bought a new canopy. And so, but I also learned a lesson about call signs, I'll give you this, is that the call sign you hate the most is the one you're going to get in these call sign review boards. The ones that you like, they'll say, no. So I knew this because I'm a third generation fighter pilot. My grandpa was a Spitfire pilot, my dad F-5s, Voodoos, and I knew this. And so when it came up, they were talking all these other ones, so I'm like, yeah, that's not so bad. And then they said scratch man. I'm like, it doesn't sound horrible. I'm like, no, that sucks. No. And they're like, scratch man. So there you go. I gave it a little bit. Yes, but it all came out of an assumption. It's exactly what we're talking about here, right? I assumed that air-to-air refueling meant the thing that I knew how to air-to-air refuel on, and it was entirely different.
Okay, we got like 10 minutes left. Why don't you guys ask some questions? What do you guys got?
Also, do you actually like help make the Mayday episodes with the?
I do, right?
Airlines?
Yeah. I did Japan Airlines 123, which was just on, and I did a couple of other ones. And all of them, actually, you could argue all of them were crashes that were caused by assumptions. 123, Japan Airlines was, they assumed they could weld on a new bulkhead. They'd never done it before, and they didn't do it. The last one I just did was a guy assumed he could replace a trim cable, but he put it on upside down. Yeah, bad day for the two guys that got killed. And then another one was the FAA developed an ADS-B test program in Alaska, and they kept changing it, and everybody up in Alaska who was flying these ADS-B traffic boxes assumed the FAA knew what they were doing, but the way they set it up, two airplanes came together, they canceled each other's signal out, and they hit each other. And they were, both guys hit, and they're like, whoa, what just happened? Where did he come from? I got ADS-B. So don't assume your box is working.
EDS bump.
Advice for becoming a fighter pilot.
It's obviously you have to go into training. The number one advice is top your course. That is the only guaranteed way. Like I went in with a singular focus. I was going to be the top of my moose truck course, so that I guarantee that because you get your choice of anything you want when you're top, or at least that one I went through. That's one thing in terms of just the motivation factor to do that. It's a different kind of role than a lot of other aspects, and there's amazing flying jobs in the Air Force, obviously. But I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and that was my singular focus. And so there's that. But I'll tell you something. I taught for 5 years almost F-18 pilots at different levels, and it's interesting because it was never only the hard engineer guy, just all sciences, nor was it just all stick and rudder kind of person. The top pilots that came through in the fighter course, they were well-rounded people. You know, and very interestingly, a lot of them had a creative outlet. You found out they were pianists or illustrators. There's something about that accessing that left-right brain balance to be a fighter pilot, because you have to be able to think in the abstract, in the moment, playing micro-fast chess. And that I found with some of the fighter pilots going through, they could technically do everything correctly according to the book, but then there were others that just had the it factor. They just sort of made it happen the way the textbook said, but they had a little something else going on. And again, aggression, applied aggression. I'm not talking just about a personality type. I'm talking about being able to apply that aggression in that larger sphere of having a well-rounded mental and physical sort of approach to life made good fighter pilots. Yeah.
What else you got?
You mentioned you might be able to, if you had a minute, tell us about something happened a year or so ago, you got yourself into a bind.
Oh yeah, that was March
Just
this year.
asking how you got there.
Yeah, no, thanks, and this is in the spirit of confessionals. I was flying this T-Bird, and the T-Bird is a tricky jet to manage the fuel, and it's a thirsty jet. We had done the flight planning, I shouldn't even say we, the owner of the jet, he has 3 of them, at least one of them for airshow and film flying, had done the flight planning the day before, and the weather systems had changed considerably, and I took off with the information from 24 hours earlier, and I found myself in Stefan's situation, where I was like, we have a big headwind right now. In my case, it was a headwind, and we were expecting 5 knots on the nose. I'm seeing 60, 80 on the nose, and we're trying to go 1,000 nautical miles with the jet. And I started doing some serious calculations and going, what is going on here? And it was interesting because not only did I go, you dumbass, like how did you not check your own weather after all these years of flying? I made the assumption that the situation hadn't changed, and I trusted somebody else with my aircraft in my life, and that was silly. So that was a big lesson for me. But also what got me out of it, which when you get into a situation like this, you want to instantly develop situational awareness of what your options are. And Mark brought up that point about had he sought the awareness that, hey, River was there, he probably would have been a really elegant solution to get out of this, showed up late for the air show, but fully fine, right? That's when I went into, okay, what do I know? What do I need to know? And I started asking those questions, because situational awareness is what? Have you done that sort of thing in human factors? The definition of situational awareness? Anyone know what that is, by the way?
No, you could start down that path.
Yeah, what do you think situational awareness is?
Awareness of the situation.
Yeah, well, that's very on the nose. But what I would say is, here's the technical definition, is knowing what has happened, knowing what is happening, but most importantly, knowing what might happen. And that's where most people go wrong with situational awareness. They don't project to what might happen. And then if you have a filter, like you brought up, where you're trying to create a mental picture that's counter to what the reality is, it includes your ability to project into the future. So what I did is I started saying, okay, what are my options? What are my divert options? And then what's really going on in the airplane? Because old fuel gauges, it's hard to tell, but we had a fuel counter. I started going to old school, like, okay, the guy that was with me in the back seat, a new pilot, I said, I want you to do 6-minute calculations, and we're going to measure the fuel down to the gallon. So I created a really accurate picture of my fuel burn. That was my first thing. Then I started, I requested higher altitude. I started building, because you climb to cope, right? So I'm sure you've heard that expression. So that if I did have an issue or my fuel gauge was wrong, I had more glide options. I started just building a whole mental picture with 3 or 4 different scenarios. And then I built in, okay, if I don't have this fuel by this point, I'm diverting here. Okay, then if I'm good at this one, if I go to this next point, another 100 miles. If I don't have this fuel, I'm going to divert to this one. And I was able to track crawl the whole way with a decision process with outs at every point. In the end, I was able to make it with my minimum fuel, all predicated on I knew exactly what the weather was at Destin. Even though I was 3 controllers earlier than I needed to be, I said, I need a favor from you, from Oakland Center or whomever it was, and said, can you get me the weather at my destination? I'm just low on fuel and I'm trying to make a decision. And you present something like that to an air traffic controller, all of a sudden they feel like they're part of your mission and they're helping you out. He was more than happy to help me out. So that was all part of me collecting all the information and creating multiple outs at different stages with a larger situational awareness bucket.
Good story. I didn't know
Yeah.
that story.
Mm-hmm.
The same week that he did that, I was flying back in my Mooney at a passenger, flying from Palm Springs to Vancouver, and I ended up, my passenger had to go pee. Mooney's a bit like a 172. You really don't want a dude like having a pee next to you. It's just not good. Anyway, so we go to try to land. I can't remember, it was one of those little Minden or something in northern Nevada. And the wind is just howling straight across the side of the runway, and it was way outside of the crosswind limits of that airplane. So I had to keep going. What I should have done is I should have gone back to Reno. But I kept going north, saying, oh, there'll be an airport up there. And when I got there, it was snowing and howling and it picking up ice. And we got it on the ground, but I gotta tell you, you kind of told me your story. I remember I told you my story. We both we were kind of, well, at least I was embarrassed about getting into that situation. So
Yeah.
it happens. Okay, what else you guys got?
How many hours do both of you have?
I stopped blogging. In turbojet fighter aircraft, I have about 7,000. And I have a couple thousand. I went to WestJet before I went into film. So I have a couple thousand on 737s.
Oh, I got 1,400 hours. I'm just still a baby.
Mark, you combined the aviation and your journalism, like in your career, not just exciting and entertaining way, but also in a very educational way. What was first for you, aviation or journalism?
It was aviation. I wanted to be coming out of, so I got into aviation when I was 9, and when I was 11, I lied and got my first fan flight. And I used to watch, I lived in Edmonton, and there used to be an airport downtown, there were 2 flight schools, and I would learn when the head instructor would change, because it was always the head instructor that did the fan flight. And then I learned there was kind of a rhythm to it. But every 6 months, the chief flight instructor went and got a job at the airlines. So I would find out there was a new instructor, so I'd go and give my $25 and I'd get another fan flight. Till one day, I'm out my fan flight after doing this 5 times, I'm probably 13 now. The guy goes, man, you've got amazing hands and feet. Because I'd had like whatever 6 hours already.
Was he just looking at your hands and feet?
Well, he saw 2 giant fish on the end of my arms. He goes, for a guy with fish hands, you're pretty good. So anyway, but I got out of high school and there were no jobs. I wanted to join the Air Force, but that was in the days where you had to like be super good looking and 20/20 vision and all that stuff. And I wasn't good looking, I was skinny and not very good looking. Unlike, Mr. Macho here. Anyway, so my second choice was I loved adventure and I became a journalist. But every time there was an aviation story, I would go and do it. And then that led me to Discovery Channel.
Which led us together in 2000 when you did the Snowbirds documentary. And then I did it the opposite way he did. I was aviation first, but as a child I always wanted to be a filmmaker as well. I had an uncle that did a little bit, and I was always inspired by that. And it was through working together, creating Air Show, and then working on it that I actually, I was a colonel, given my full colonel promotion, going to be the base commander, or wing commander in Moose Jaw, and I decided to get out and go be a filmmaker, transitioning through WestJet for a couple of years till we sold that series. And I've gone the other way, where lots of aviation experience up front, and then being mentored by Mark in Air Show and Highway Through Hell, and now I'm sort of off doing my own thing. I don't know if anyone saw Midway, the movie. So I directed all the flying actors in that. So I'm starting to get more into that in the Hollywood side of it, and I have a couple of productions of my own. And yeah, we've sort of had these mirrored careers and stayed friends for the last 20-some years doing that.
Mark, if you have one, what was your favorite Mayday episode? Like the one that sort of resonated most with you?
I didn't actually do this one. My favorite Mayday episode, my friend Larry Bamberg wrote it, is the Gimli Glider.
Hey, we just watched it.
Did you guys just watch that one?
We just watched it.
Yeah, that story, right?
So do you guys know that Bob Pearson, who was the pilot, is in that episode? Did you guys know that?
Oh, yeah.
He's the guy who fuels the airplane and hands it to the pilot. And I have a relationship with that airplane. When you guys are here, sometimes you see a little yellow airplane that looks actually a lot like Super Dave's airplane, taxiing around here. So that's mine, that's a Harmon rocket. And it's Charlie Golf Alpha Uniform November. When I imported that in 2013 for Air Show, because that was the camera plane for Air Show, I went online to get my registration. And I went, Charlie Golf Alpha Uniform November, that's familiar. That's the Gimli Glider. So my airplane, they call it Little Gimli, And there's a little piece of the Gimli glider inside of it. And on the 35th anniversary, I went to Gimli, I put Bob in the back. We went up to 10,000 feet, I turned the motor off, and we glided in, and Bob got it to about this high off the runway, and then I took over and we landed it at exactly the moment on exactly the same runway 35 years later. So it was kind of a cool story. Yeah, I flew into Camarillo one time, which is the most northerly airport in Los Angeles, and I land, and when you go into an FBO in an airplane, they actually track you on the way in with all these new, amazing, flight radar or whatever it is. So this guy's tracking me as I come in and I land, and it's dark, and my lights are flashing, and this big, huge fuel truck with like a fuel pump on it pulls up next to me. And I shut the engine down and I open my canopy and I look way up. There's a guy, I think his name is Butch or something. He's got an STP hat. He goes, "Hey, that's not a 767. He's looking way down at me. I said, "No, it's not." And he's disappointed because he thought he was going to sell like $12,000 worth of fuel. He goes, "That's not a 747 or 769. I said, "No, it's a Harman rocket." And he goes, "Oh, do you need gas?" I said, "Yeah, I'll take 45 gallons.
Not liters.
Not leaders.
Yeah, they hadn't updated it yet in the computer. So, hey, we've probably gone past our time a little bit, but thank you very much for having us. Are there any other? Is there a last question or anything?
Well, yeah, I was actually just wondering with the Mayday, how do you actually make those episodes? Do you actually talk to many parties?
Yeah, so we have a very unique relationship with the Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, and now the show's been on for 20 years. So they kind of know that we're not going to burn them, we're not going to make anybody look bad. This is really a learning experience for everybody. We have this thing called technical review, which is something that's been sort of pioneered by Discovery Channel, is that we let all the parties watch the show. They don't get to say, "Hey, I didn't like how you had the actor's hair, and I didn't like his glasses," or whatever. They can't change anything editorially, but they can point out our mistakes and say, "You know what, you got this wrong." And because they do that, we can fix all the mistakes, because we make them, before it goes on the air, and we can make the highest sort of fidelity product in terms of accuracy possible. So we take the report, there's always 3 reports. There's the safety board's report. There's going to be usually a report that comes from the courts, because there's always going to be a lawsuit. And yeah, and then often, if it's an accident involving an Airbus, there'll be a report from France, right? Because the country of manufacture, they investigate. The country where the accident happened, they investigate, and then there's usually something from the courts. And we look at all 3 of those, and the problem is when they say 3 different things. Then you've got to pick a path between them.
Oh, wow. You actually you find all the pilots and crew involved?
Yeah, we try to find, if there were survivors, we try to find the flight crew. But if it's, something like Japan Airlines, there is no flight crew. Interesting enough, on Japan Airlines, everybody dies. But Japan Airlines were amazing. I mean, they actually gave us the bulkhead because they recovered it, and they haven't. They let us shoot the bulkhead. And the reason why, any idea why Japan Airlines wanted us to tell that story? Because they want to show people they learned from that they are building on the mistakes of the past.
Sorry, what's that was it? Sorry. That's the one that was the tail off, right?
That's the one that lost the tail.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. They were just amazing people to deal with.
If I wasn't mistaken, didn't they actually, some people survive the crash?
Sorry, yes, there were 2.
Well,
There were 2 or 4. You're right. I forgot. Yeah, there were survivors. I can't remember if we interviewed that survivor or not. I don't think I did in that show. Yeah. You also have to be careful with passengers, especially because it's such a, they've probably recovered from their PTSD. I don't want to take them back down that path again. Well, listen, thanks for having us. You guys have a great resource here in Anna and Peter and the team. They are really top of their game in terms of this industry. Anna's in the business of managing risk. And she's a great resource. I talk to her all the time about risk, and and, you know, pushing the limits towards that line of no risk, no reward, but knowing where to stay on which side of it. And tap her, she's a font of knowledge. And thank you very much for having us. It was really fun for us to watch that show again. I forgot how much fun it was making it.
And thank you so much for taking the time and coming here. We have learned so much. I have learned so much. And I've seen this video before, and every time you pick on something new, something you have missed the previous time, and you guys are amazing. Really appreciate it.
Well, we'll leave a copy of it here for you guys, and you guys can watch it again if you want, or other people can watch it or whatever. But thanks again.
Is the air show series available anywhere for
On Apple, whatever Apple, you can buy from Apple.
Okay. Okay.
iTunes.
But is it Discovery not airing it anymore?
No, it's out of license now.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, guys.
So it's like that. It's funny because if you do a regular handshake with someone our age, we love that.